A ballerina's perspective, from performing with New York City Ballet and Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater to publishing poetry books and mentoring kids and teens. Join us in a weekly discussion with experts to gain mental health clarity and achieve growth and moral consciousness. Give our show a 5 stars, comment, share, and come along for the ride. It's mostly
Okay.
like people who are on a spiritual journey who are going through change in careers or leaving
Great.
relationships, toxic, realigning to their spiritual essence, stuff like that.
Great. Love it. My kind of podcast. Yeah.
Welcome to the Growth, Grace, and Gratitude podcast. Today we are back with a special guest, Saul Kennedy, who is the founder of the Best Interest app, which helps co-parents navigate the messiness of parenting. He is a serial founder who has built and sold multiple companies and has been the head of product at Dropcam, a PM at Google, and an angel investor in companies like Coinbase, GitLab, and Instacart. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Sol. I think this topic is so needed. I know a lot of people are on this spiritual journey where they feel like once they go through an awakening, they start to see relationships in a different way. And oftentimes that can lead to separation, divorce, and that affects the children involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a challenging process to go through co-parenting, and having gone through it myself, it felt like a very important place to provide some healing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like when you are learning to co-parent, you're also kind of learning how to navigate divorce as well as figuring out what's the best for your child. How do you help parents navigate that through the Best Interest app?
Well, Aria, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a story of my own journey. And 6 years ago, I was just fresh into my separation. My life was essentially torn apart. I was in a new place, and I'm falling to sleep, and it's maybe 10 o'clock at night, and I hear this ding on my phone, and it's not an SMS, it's not an email. I know immediately that it's a message from Our Family Wizard, which was an app that we were using at the time to communicate. It's a co-parenting app. And I knew in that moment that I wasn't going to be able to go to sleep with that message still ringing in my ear, that I needed to not only read it, but probably spend the next couple hours figuring out how I would respond in a good way. And that's no way to live. That's no way to rebuild a life. And it was constantly taking me away from presence with my kids. And so it was really, that was the problem that I realized. But there really weren't tools at the time to fix this. The only apps that the courts really cared about or knew about were Our Family Wizard, Talking Parents, and they're really more about communication rather than reducing conflict. And fast forward to 3 years ago, I was playing with my kids, or I was putting them in bed, and we were using AI to make bedtime stories. And it was fun to collaborate on bedtime stories using AI in that way. And that night I thought, well, gosh, it seems to really understand language. So maybe it would help me understand what was going on between my co-parent and I and give me some ideas. And instantly after I uploaded those messages, I felt seen, I felt understood. And that really was the moment, the inspiration behind Best Interests, that AI can operate. So really noticing that there were no tools available, and then finding this new platform that suddenly understood and really got me. That was the spark that ignited the app that I work on today, which is the Best Interest app for co-parents.
That's amazing. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I think oftentimes when we are feeling kind of helpless in the moment, we really desire some kind of like inspiration to come to us, and oftentimes it is through kind of like the chaos that something comes to help us understand how to put the puzzle back together, or at least a few pieces back together. And what are some important lessons you learned just from your own role as a co-parent, as a father?
Well, there's so much. I mean, I think that anyone who has gone through parenting will tell you that there's really no way that you can prepare to be a parent. And for me, it's been almost it's been a spiritual journey of self-discovery. You know, you have this child in a fairly naive way, and then suddenly they challenge you in ways that you didn't expect. And, you know, I don't know how all of this works, but I would find that magically the unhealed wounds from my childhood would kind of come up whenever my child reached that stage in their own life. And it was, once I recognized that, it was a lot easier to ride those waves. Be like, oh yeah, when I was 5, that's what was going on for me. Okay, great, I got this. And so yeah, that was one thing that I have learned being a parent. And then in particular, you know, I did not ever expect that I would end up as a divorced dad. That was not part of the game plan. And it also has been, I would say, the most challenging experience of my entire life. Not only to get to the place where I thought that the best way was out. It took a very long time to get to that place. It took a lot of growth and belief that I would survive that. But then to make that transition from being in a relationship and then recreating my life, I really felt like I recreated myself. I in that process I grew and I was challenged, and then looking back, I don't even honestly recognize the person that I was. I've always been a great guy, but I also feel like I'm just so much more of myself now than I was then, if that makes sense.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that kind of like raw vulnerability. And yeah, it is very true. Oftentimes, our spiritual awakening happens when an event or a person, something triggers something within us to kind of activate or awaken. And it forces us to look at ourselves in the mirror. And oftentimes, that is our unhealed inner child. So, like when you mentioned children are obviously bringing something up to the surface within yourself, 100% true. I do inner child healing work with my clients, and just the the depth of how they connect to their own childhood and their own memories. These could be suppressed or subconscious, where they had mother wounds or father wounds, different attachment styles that carried them into adolescent, teenage, adulthood, and then partnerships, romantic relationships. They continued the cycle of how they attached during childhood. So if there was not a secure attachment with family, it's really challenging to get into a healthy relationship because the inner child will attach anxiously or avoidantly, and it creates so much codependence, and in a way that we can't even sometimes see how we are attaching to others when they're also attaching in their own way. So it's so hard to kind of figure out your identity.
What an incredible journey to go through as a human, to be in living unconsciously in some ways. I identify strongly with being codependent and in recovery, but there was a time in my life when I was married, for sure, and even for a while after that, I was deeply in the unconscious aspect of codependency. I didn't know what I didn't know, and that was just the way that I was. And so, even like I said, facing the idea of separation in that way to someone I had been married to almost 10 years was terrifying. And also it was as if I was learning. I remember sitting with my therapist for the first time. It took me until I was 38 to see therapists or see a therapist. And I highly recommend going earlier, even if you don't think there's something wrong, because I love going to therapy now. And it was so beneficial to me. But I remember sitting in the room with my therapist, and I was talking about some challenge that I was having with my then wife, and she said, "Well, you can set a boundary for that." And she said it so clearly, and yet I didn't. I was like, "What do you mean? What is a boundary?" and and then, like beyond understanding, there was this idea that I think I was just really afraid of of disconnection of any type. And I had this belief in my mind that by setting a boundary that would create disconnection, and then she might leave me, and I don't want to do that. And so it was hard to even set that first boundary, let alone change the dynamic where I was setting boundaries. That didn't work. There wasn't both parties have to come into that equation for that to work and to shift. So
Yes, that is so familiar to me. I sense you're like a sensitive soul and empath, and we have so
yeah,
many of
yeah,
these kind of people in our group where I do like new moons and full moons, where we kind of like get together and try to like clear out our emotions through journaling, through singing, through dancing. Like I grew up dancing professional ballet, so I love hosting whether like it's in person or online classes. There's like ballet bar, and it really like helps to clear out emotions. Like I find even when we're moving our bodies in this kind of like somatic therapy way, we're releasing emotions. Sometimes people actually cry because there's just like pent up energy in the body and we don't know how to get rid of it. So like you mentioned, yes, therapy is so good. It helps to activate our psyche through communication. It's so hard to understand sometimes what we're feeling, whether it is like fear, unknown, like what's going to happen in the future. And yes, talking and moving and just using your consciousness in this holistic way, I think it's so important. And so many people who are listeners to the podcast, they are sensitive souls, they are empaths, and I feel like there's a level of soul mastery currently that they are craving this honest approach to love where the openness and the kind of like psychic understanding of the purpose of a partnership is like simplicity, like again, openness. And when the alignment to a partnership doesn't match and there's a completely different person entering our field that's on a different wavelength or frequency, it's so hard to get that to bond, to unify, to grow in the same way. So I totally understand your challenges because being a sensitive soul, it's like you have to understand yourself first in a way. And yes, boundaries are the next level of like being a human. It's like, how can you put boundaries to just understand the value of protecting yourself without fear and without allowing yourself to think like if I put a boundary I will be rejected, neglected, abandoned. Like allow the boundary to exist without over obsessing, and that's also a challenge.
yeah. I mean, we're all learning as we go, and I think from the place where I'm in now, where I can confidently say that I feel much more conscious in my life, and I've been able to create it more consciously. It wasn't like an overnight thing. I remember reading Judy Orloff's book. I forget the title, but something about empaths, and that was actually the first book, the first learning that I read. Oh wow, uh, that's that's who I am. And then I read the chapter on narcissism, and I started, oh my god, makes so much sense. And so like we learn about it, but then it takes a while to make that shift. And I would say that for me, with being able to set boundaries, it's really a journey of self love. And there are many paths to get there, but the more that you love yourself and you have yourself, you no longer outsource that. You no longer need anyone else in your life to validate you. You're just okay. And when you're okay, then it's okay to set a boundary because it's okay if someone leaves your life. In fact, that's great. That's a good outcome. If you set a boundary and someone says, "I'm out of here," then you've just lost a terrible friend. So great.
100%. And think of the value and the amount of healing it's directly or indirectly causing the child. Because when the child understands that the parent is putting boundaries, and the child also
Yeah.
grows up, even energetically not knowing what's happening, but energetically in a way of like a protective field, a protective space, because they're going to kind of follow suit. And yeah, I think so often when the parents begin awakening and putting boundaries, it creates such a ripple effect for the children. And it's the best thing that parents can do for their kids because kids are an energetic kind of blueprint of parents, and they have to follow similar patterns, behaviors, healing cycles. And if parents don't kind of like fix or heal parts of their subconscious self, the child has to continue. So where the parent has kind of healed that space, the child can flourish in the other spaces that, otherwise it would be closed, or it would be harder to have access to that. So even from like a spiritual perspective, it's amazing when parents are really doing the work. And as challenging and traumatizing as it is, that's a really positive ripple effect for the kids for sure.
If you're ready to shake off that daily stress, come join us for online beginner adult ballet and yoga classes each week to connect with the flow of movement and the art of ballet into perfect synergy. Come as you are and learn to love your body a little bit more and gain strength and flexibility with each class. All are welcome. Sign up at balletartsmovement@gmail.com. First class free. Podpitch is the first and only software that finds, writes, and sends pitches to podcast hosts from your actual email address. Podpitch will make sure you get podcast bookings guaranteed. Link in the description of the podcast. ClickFunnels easily build any type of online business and sales funnel in record time, no matter what your product, service, or niche, without any tech design or experience whatsoever. Try the ClickFunnels 14-day free trial. Link in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, in co-parenting circles, you often hear this belief that the co-parents have to get along for it to be okay for the kids, and it's almost as if the advice is to pretend that things are okay in order to make them feel okay. And I actually strongly disagree. I think that, of course, if co-parents can do the healing work and own their parts and show up in a good way for one another, then great. But then in certain situations that doesn't seem to really happen. And and I think in those situations, the most authentic thing is to just create distance and space where it's needed. And I think the kids then learn, like, I'm very proud that I've been able to create a home that feels safe and where emotions are allowed, and where my kids know that they can be themselves. And that's like the most important rule, just be yourself. And they really know that. They trust that in me, that I will always have their back when they are themselves. And then they have a different house, and it has different rules, and it has different ways of being. And I think that's okay. There's a splitting that happens, of course, but I think that they'll be able to grow up and they'll know, okay, well, I like this aspect and I like this aspect, and they'll be able to create a life that's maybe more informed by the different models that they saw growing up. Whereas when I grew up, I only had one model, and I recreated that in my first marriage. And so I hope that I'm giving them more ideas of how to love and how to be.
That's so beautifully said. Yeah, that's true. Everybody does their part the best that they can do with the tools that they have access to. People are learning about conscious parenting, and that's also like conscious reparenting yourself. It's like the more you're going to parent your kids, you're also having to reparent your inner child.
Yeah, it's been that was one thing speaking about growing up and or watching my kids grow up, is that I also have had a relationship with my mother in that, transitioning to being a grandmother and interfacing with my kids. And, I've gotten to see how she is with them. And she's a wonderful grandma. And yet also there are things that she says and does that I'm like, oh, that informs a little bit how I am. It's helpful to see that. And yeah, maybe more supervision when the kids are hanging out with her. And I think that we have an opportunity as parents to learn and grow, and then be with our kids in a different way, and then they have this new model that they can work from.
Yeah, so true. And talk a little bit about the emotional firewall. How do you use technology as a buffer to regulate your nervous system when dealing with a bully. I love that topic. That's super super important because everybody experiences
Yeah.
bullying and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love this topic too. And I think that I know that there's so much fear around it. And I think that just taking it a step back, I actually think that AI is here to just basically enhance all of humanity, or put a, perhaps it's a magnifying glass on all humanity. So there's good and bad aspects of it. And I think that if we shine the magnifying glass on the good things of AI, it really can help us. And I think that one of those areas that it can help us with is that it can shine light on the darkness. There's a lot of hidden abuse in human relationships. And yet now we have this amazing tool that can sit in between two people. Maybe they're married, maybe they're divorced, maybe it's a boss and an employee. And it can help manage that relationship to ensure that everyone can hear each other better, almost serving like a translator. And so that insight really is the root of best interest. We're never going to write messages for you. I don't think that that's good. I think that everything needs to come from your self, your being, but we're going to give you ideas of how you can rewrite it so that your co-parent will understand it and it's not going to result in a conflict. And by sitting in the middle of that, we're helping this relationship get better. But then in terms of the firewall, we actually will filter messages coming from your co-parent and strip out everything that isn't child focused. So even if they're maybe feeling a little spicy that day, or they're feeling really resentful about what happened in the divorce, that part doesn't get to you. And I think that that's really allows our parents to do the healing that they need to do so that they can stay present with their kids and rebuild their lives and make it less traumatizing in that process. I think it's just so important. And it's a tool that AI will be able to help us in a variety of contexts, not just in co parenting.
That's amazing for sure. We always have like our triggers or our shadow self comes up when we're healing and processing. And yeah, we have to, in a way, protect ourselves also because we do sometimes want to react based on past trauma. And it's hard to just hold that in. But yeah, that sounds like such a great way to mitigate chaos and to kind of like healthily navigate conversation and communication you have to have. What advice would you give to your younger self, knowing everything that you've gone through and everything you experienced?
I often talk to my younger self, and give some advice.
That's great.
um, you know, I think that the biggest lesson that I've learned so far in life is that the best choice that I can make at every moment is to be brave. And that means when I'm feeling fearful, lean into it. And that doesn't mean go and touch a spider. That means, like, if I'm feeling nervous about giving a speech, give the speech. Like, there's no harm really, other than our own, internal critic maybe getting a little bit more juice or something. Every time I have said yes to something that is scary, that has resulted in me growing and arriving at a place that I feel even better than before. So that would be the advice that I'd give to my younger self: is just be brave. So be brave.
It's such beautiful advice. And I think it's such a wonderful message to the inner child because oftentimes the inner child is scared due to past kind of trauma or past bullying. And the more that
Yeah.
we can give ourselves permission to be scared and to keep going, like what a great cheerleader to be for yourself. So that's amazing. And where can people connect with you and see all of your content and get the app?
Yeah. So if a listener is a co-parent and would like to check out Best Interest, you can go to bestinterestapp.com, or you can find us on the iOS App Store, or the Play Store on your phone. And I would love to hear from you if you have any feature requests or feedback for me. I'm just soul at bestinterest.app.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Sol, for coming on the podcast and sharing more about your work and your inspiring story to help co parents everywhere navigate the messiness of parenting and inner child parenting as well.
Really nice to connect with you. Thanks for having me on today.